Good evening, Miss Redfield. I'm your public attorney. You'll have to excuse the mess. I am blind as a bat. Hey guys, welcome back to a real-life exciting adventure here. We've got a serious, actual viral outbreak on our hands here, and it's fucking up all our lives and making us stay at home and find shit to do. So now's the perfect time for me to make a comeback. I wanted to make this video sooner, of course, but some real-life shit happened in my life. Namely, my dog died back in the end of February, and I don't know if you guys have been through that. I'm sure some of you have, but it's a real fucking downer, okay? So, yeah, I was kind of a shut-in. I wasn't on YouTube a lot. I wasn't even watching my favorite content creators. I just was kind of keeping to myself, but that's not the way to do it. And now is the time to come together and, be there for each other. So that's why, since I'm not working as much as I was in my other job, I got more time. So now's the perfect time to come out with this video. I had to make this before April because Resident Evil 3 comes out that first week, and we are all going to be very busy with that. But yeah, you can count on more content from me here in the near future. In fact, I'm working on another video concurrently with this one. Because April is the month of remakes, and everyone is excited for Resident Evil 3, everyone is excited for Final Fantasy VII Remake, including myself, naturally. But there's another remake that is coming out that month, not originally, but it got pushed and delayed just like Final Fantasy VII did, and now it's the same month as Final Fantasy VII Remake, so I anticipate that game getting unfairly ignored just because of when it's being released. So I will be making a separate video on that, which I've already kind of started doing. So with that being said, the topic of this video is the Resident Evil 2 remake. Sort of old news now, sure, but I never did put out there my thoughts on it. And I've said in the past I don't like to make videos that talk about the same thing that other content creators talk about, but for this one, not enough people are saying it, so I kind of had to get my thoughts out there. Now, since this is a quasi-review, let me just be upfront and let you know that I absolutely fucking loved the Resident Evil 2 remake. However, it was not a perfect remake. It also doesn't answer the question that a lot of us had after Resident Evil 7, was that, does Capcom have the storytelling chops to keep the series going and keep it interesting? Because the story was sort of all over the place in Resident Evil 7, and they had Richard Piercy, of sort of, Spec Ops: The Line and Fear fame, as the narrative consultant, which was sort of a confusing title. So we wondered, does Capcom have what it takes to keep the series going forward and have it make sense? But the Resident Evil 2 remake sort of, it gave them a pass on that, because the Resident Evil 2 story was already sort of established. We already kind of knew the basic story beats. All they had to really do was go back, play the game, or look at the Resident Evil Bible. I'm sure they have, which they may not have consulted always when they make their other games. But yeah, Resident Evil 2 story was already out there. It was already a thing. They didn't have to do much to make the remake, badass, as badass as it was back in the day. What they did have to do was, if they weren't going to do fixed camera angles, they did have to make the gameplay solid and badass and awesome, and I would argue, yes, they did do that, absolutely. However, there were some times when, and I thought I was going to like it over the fixed camera, but I didn't at all times. I did throughout the bulk of the game, but when Mr. X showed up, I found that those fixed camera angles would have been a lot more helpful in getting away from that asshole. But once you kind of know, and the game doesn't really explain it to you or tell you, but once you kind of know what things will get his attention and get him on your tail, you avoid doing it, such as, you know, running around all over the place, gunfire. He hears that shit, so he comes to find you doing that way. So the more you've already cleared out the hallway, especially the library, you absolutely want to clear out the library as soon as possible, because there is a puzzle you have to do there, and the game does not freeze while you're doing that. So you absolutely need to clear out the library as early as possible when you play Resident Evil 2 if you haven't played it already. So yeah, pro tip, clear out the library. But for the most part, it was a great, perfect, you know, homage to the original game. But not quite so perfect. Now, I don't know if it was because of time constraints or what, but some content was, I don't want to say missing as in if they were going to put it in there, but they couldn't, or decided not to. But content that was missing in that I don't think they planned on putting it in there to begin with. The obvious example is there was no ravens, there was no giant, you know, tarantulas. Now, I know I'm not the first one to point that out, but I do want to point out with the ravens, I am not, I didn't miss them. I'm glad they weren't in it. Some of you, you know, and I'm kind of a purist too. I guess it would have been a better, more complete package overall if they had been in it. But let's face it, they would have been a pain in the ass. Think about it. We don't have auto aim. They are very small targets. We have a very manual aim going on here. And because of the way the cursor works, it would have been a total pain in the ass. We don't even have a Resident Evil 4 style laser, which makes hitting moving targets a lot easier. We didn't have that. The ravens would have been a total pain in the ass. I mean, you probably would have switched to your knife, but the knife in this game has a durability, and you can't use it forever. And that was one thing that sort of irked me in the beginning when I started this game. But over time, I was like, okay, I get why the knife has a durability, because if it didn't, you could use it to, you know, kill confirm all the zombies you drop, and that would make the game a little bit, you know, too easy. But you're also in this, you know, enclosed space, mostly in the police station and the other locations, and the sense of, you know, location in terms of where you dropped bodies in the building, it kind of matters. Many of those zombies are still laying around, the ones you killed, you know, giving you that ever-present sort of nervousness of, like, is he going to get back up, you know, this and that. And if you had an infinite knife, you wouldn't have to worry about that kind of thing, because you double-check to make sure that you killed the zombie. But that's what makes the infinite knife so cool when you unlock it. But yeah, so I understand that, and I'm cool with the ravens not being in, because they would have been a small pain in the ass target that you would have wasted knife durability on. So I'm cool with them not being in. The tarantulas, though, and I'll be honest with you guys. When I was younger, I had a real big sort of arachnophobia thing, and I got over it eventually. Learning about them helped. I got over a lot of things. Teen angst is I'm most proud of getting over. But the tarantulas, oh my god. So there weren't that many in the original game. There was like, I swear to god, there was like only 2 or 3 or 4 maybe in the original Resident Evil 2. So their absence from this game wasn't, you know, it wasn't crazy, and there weren't that many to begin with. But oh my god, you guys. One of the things I learned about tarantulas, about, you know, the different species of spiders, is tarantulas can fucking swim, okay? They can swim in the fucking water. And how fucking terrifying would it be if you were in the sewer area, you were in like waist-high fucking sewer water, and you see this big-ass giant fucking tarantula swimming in your direction, and you are in waist-high water again, so your mobility is fucked. You know how fucking panic-inducing that would be for people? Oh my god, Capcom, you should hire me. My goal, my singular goal, as a Capcom Resident Evil team member, would be to make the player piss themselves. And I would do it with the tarantulas. But yeah, no, they could have done something really awesome, but missed opportunity, Capcom. Damn it. I know some of you are like, yeah, don't hire him, Capcom, please. That sounds fucking terrifying. Yeah, I know, but that's the point. Anyway, it's more terrifying than jump scares, right? That's one of the things I always fucking hated about, like, Outlast and things like that. Is like, jump scares don't do it for me. I guess I expect them, but I also have. I mean, I don't jump and scream like other people do, but I do get quiet and alert when there's a jump scare. But they're also cheap, as from a storytelling perspective and just a game direction or movie direction perspective. Jump scares are cheap, easy little scares you can throw at the viewer or the player. They don't. It doesn't take real creativity to do that. That nervousness you get from wondering if the zombie is still alive, or the terror at seeing a tarantula swimming at you in waist-high water. That's creative. That's fucking horror right there. Same thing with like PT and the Silent Hills thing, like knowing that Lisa could pop out at you at any moment, knowing that you had to listen to the guy on the radio and fucking do whatever he said, otherwise Lisa would fucking kill you. I mean, that's creative. That is fucking horror. So trust me, guys, I know what I'm talking about. Now, that's not to say jump scares are completely bullshit. They can actually be used quite effectively, but not everyone knows how to use them effectively. They can be used to great effect by putting them in the right place or strategic. Like, I'll give you an example. The last jump scare that actually got me pretty good because I didn't see it coming was in Resident Evil 7, actually, when right before the Marguerite boss fight, and you go up those stairs to get to the second floor, and she like fucking burst through the fucking window at you. I was like, I didn't even see that coming. I got excited. Like, that's the other thing. Like, when a jump scare is done well and done right, I get excited. I'm like, yes, I didn't see that fucking coming. Yes. I have a good friend of mine who he's a big horror fan too, and he calls it a fear boner. Like, that's like, I love something that's so fucking scary it gives me a fucking fear boner. I mean, like, yes. So jump scares have their uses, but they're often too unwieldy in the hands of most directors. But yeah, I prefer true horror craft, and the tarantula thing would have been great in that way. Now, because there weren't that many tarantulas in the original Resident Evil 2, I wasn't really... I mean, yeah, I was a little disappointed. But I understood why their absence was there. And what they replaced them with, those G embryo monsters, made a little bit more sense for the story. Because if you think about it, tarantulas don't just live anywhere. It made sense for them to be in Resident Evil 1 because the mansion was basically an umbrella facility where they were making, doing all these experiments on different animals and, arachnids and things like that. So yeah, it would make sense for the giant tarantulas to escape there, but would you really find tarantulas just in the city somewhere? Those things they don't tend to be in heavily populated areas. I mean, yeah, it was the sewer, but the G embryos, yeah, those are abominations of science. There was the G virus testing going on, so their sort of replacement, the G embryos, kind of made more sense for the story. So I give Capcom a little bit of a pass on that, but Tarantula is still a little bit more terrifying. Anyway, what else? The giant moth. The giant fucking moth was missing. There was a giant moth in the original Resident Evil 2 when you get to the labs. and it was a whole. This is why I always say, especially you younger guys, you gotta play the original games. Like, don't just wait for the remake, because what I was afraid would happen did happen, and what that was is, if you remake a game from the ground up, if it's not a one-to-one remake, meaning it's not going to be the exact same game. Some things are going to change, and some things are going to be left out for a multitude of reasons. Sometimes things are going to be left out because it was a little too outlandish, like we were afraid the giant alligator would be a victim of that, but no, thankfully they put it in and it was fucking awesome. But some things are going to be left out because, cultural sensibilities fucking change. I mean, look at Square Enix's fucking ethics committee that decided that, I don't know, there was something wrong with Tifa's outfit. Yeah, it's a fantasy game. I mean, yeah, her outfit wasn't too practical in the original, but so fucking what? I mean, Cloud's wielding big-ass swords with those. I mean, he's not exactly Arnold Schwarzenegger with those arms, man. I mean, but it's a fantasy. We all accept that about that universe, about RPGs in general. But, modern sensibilities change, so we gotta change Tifa's outfit, gotta give her the fucking skirts. The shorts underneath the skirt, I guess that's what they call it. And yeah, so if a game is being remade and it's not a one-to-one remake, beware of that. You should check out the original source material that it's based on. You really should. I mean, it doesn't just go for video games, it goes for movies too. Especially for movies and video games, they'll even throw in little Easter eggs that only someone that played or watched the original will notice in the remake. So, there's that you're missing out on. I mean, I don't care how awkward the tank controls are, you guys who haven't played the original games, play them. Like, Resident Evil 3 is about to come out now, Resident Evil 2 is already out. So it's a little too late for you to experience those old games first, but you should, going forward, make an effort. If an awesome game is being remade and a lot of older gamers are excited about it, maybe see what the fuss was about, because they made a difference to us all those years ago. And yeah, technology's better, graphics are way better now, but that doesn't mean you won't get something out of them. I can promise you that. So yeah, they took out the giant moth. In fact, there was an entire wing of the laboratory at the end of the game that you did not get to access in this remake, that you could access in the original game. So yeah, I mean, things like that. In fact, probably my biggest criticism of this game is the way they handled the Claire and Leon scenario stories, the A and B scenarios, because we were told, including by Capcom, that there'd be no zapping system, and there wasn't, but that there would be one singular story. It wouldn't be like an A scenario, B scenario kind of thing. But they kind of did try to do that, but in sort of a half-ass way. I almost wish they had just done kind of the Resident Evil 1 thing, where you pick your main protagonist and the other character is off doing their thing. And but for the most part, it's the exact same game with obvious story differences depending on who you interact with more. For instance, in Resident Evil 1, if you pick Chris, you get there with Jill and Wesker, and Barry's missing, and Barry's not in Chris's game at all. But Wesker is. You run into team leader of Bravo team, and you interact with Rebecca. If you play as Jill, you get there with Barry and Wesker, and Chris is missing, and you interact with Barry throughout the game instead of Rebecca. And you know what I mean? It's the same game, but it sort of handles the character differences through the story. And I almost wish they had done that, because the B scenario, A scenario thing was sort of half-assed in this remake. I mean, it really, really was. I mean, I'm glad that they still did the whole you have to play as both characters to get the true ending That's cool. I'm glad that was back, but they just they didn't hand. They're like it's a completely number one in the original game. Mr. X did not even appear until scenario B. And I don't know about you guys, but those of you that played the original back in the day, Mr. X was a fucking game changer. Like, when you're playing Scenario B, you're expecting, okay, I'm playing as the other character now, gotta shoot some zombies, and then all of a sudden this big motherfucker shows up, and you're like, what the fuck is this? What is this thing? Why is it after me? Like, why wasn't it in the other character's game? Like, what the fuck's going on? So, Mr. X's exclusive appearance in Scenario B was a shocker and awesome. And I wish they kind of retained that in this game, but no, they put Mr. X in both scenarios. They didn't necessarily neglect canon because Sherry got infected and then got cured, and that's how she was able to heal later because the G virus was in her DNA from that point on. So she healed in Resident Evil 6 when Jake and Sherry crashed. So they didn't fuck with canon necessarily, but one big difference that kind of bugged me was Ada's death, and I put death in quotes because obviously Ada survives, at least to be in Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 6. But, so when I say death, and I put it in quotes, I mean she fakes her death. So if you play as Leon in Scenario A, Ada falls to her death and dies that way, and it's less believable when she shows up at the end of the game to throw you a rocket launcher. In Scenario B, though, the one we all consider to be canon back in the day, she dies in his arms, which is less ambiguous. So when she shows up later in the game to throw him that rocket launcher, it's like, oh cool, she survived, awesome. But they went with the falling to her death thing in the remake, which is even more unbelievable. You're like, what? Why did you go with that one? Like, it was way more believable for her to come back if she just faked her death. Or she took some, I don't know, false death capsule to make it appear as though she was dead because she's a spy and she has all those fucking gadgets. So she faked her death. But the way they went with was the falling through the shaft. Did she have her grappling hook? She didn't seem to have her grappling hook yet. I mean, that, I don't know. I would have picked that apart if I'd been on the team, at least as a consultant. I'd have been like, guys, are you sure you want to do that? Because, whatever. But yeah, Ada survives, even though we all saw her fall, 50 stories. Whatever. Yeah, so there was that. I did like the newer, stronger weapons they give you, and that this B scenario was a little harder. But again, like, what's the point if you're not going to change the game that much? In the original game, the one we all accept as canon is Claire Scenario A and Leon Scenario B. And in Scenario A, Claire, cures Sherry, fights William Birkin and all his mutations. And in Scenario B, Leon interacts with Ada, sees her die in his arms, and then his problem is Mr. X. And that's kind of how it should have remained. But don't get me wrong, the game is so fucking good that we can overlook all these things, but I have to pick this apart because it was, I think, a mistake on Capcom's part. Not a game ruining mistake. Don't get me wrong, but they are there, and fans of the original version will notice them. And these little issues, they don't really affect much other than replayability, because that's where it's way more repetitive the second time around. By the way, if you haven't played before, I recommend playing as Claire first, and then Leon, because Claire's default weapon carries way less ammo That's the other thing. Even though you get a better weapon, it fires different ammo, and you can't craft that ammo. So on the one side, they give you more of that ammo throughout the game, so that's good. But that does leave you with fewer options because you still have the default gun and you still craft, the default ammo. Like I said, you can't craft the new ammo. The new ammo, I believe, is 45 ACP, and the ammo you craft is 9mm. But yeah, so sometimes that leaves you in sort of a tight ammo spot. But 45 is a stronger caliber cartridge, so it helps, but it doesn't. The scenario B, the second playthrough, is harder, but like I said, pick Claire first, then Leon, and you'll have a less of a hard time. Anyway, so other than those little errors in judgment I pointed out, I did love some of the expansions and some of the just outright changes to the story. I love how they expanded on Chief Irons' role because he was a total fucking psycho in the original game. They made Annette Birkin a little bit more sympathetic, whereas before she was just a total raging bitch. But what they did with Irons was great. I was really hoping they would expand on him because the great thing about the original game is, unlike the first game, Resident Evil 1, you didn't have a lot of NPCs other than, Rebecca, Barry, and Wesker, but Wesker turned out to be the villain, of course, and there weren't other human survivors around because it took place at this isolated location, mansion. Whereas Resident Evil 2 took place, in the city, at the police station. So there were some survivors that were around, and the human survivors were often worse than, the zombies themselves. Brian Irons was a serial fucking rapist and psycho, and Annette Birkin was just a raving bitch, like I said. And that was cool. It was like the horror never stopped, I guess. But I loved Sherry's playthrough, not playthrough, but Sherry's portion was way better in the remake than the original game. In the original game, she was, had to take her from point A to point B. There were zombies, but she had no way to fight them. So you kind of had to just practice your dodging. This time was way better, way fucking better. The orphanage thing was like fucking cool. I did love how they expanded on all that. Mr. X was, I loved how they handled him because his appearances were very sort of scripted in the original game, and this time he has a competent AI that is constantly stalking you. So when he's around, tends to be sort of scripted too, but when he is around, he's around, and he's listening for you, and he's just kind of fucking pacing all over the police station looking for your ass. And like I said, you can do things to attract his attention, so watch out for that. He's also a fucking powerhouse, as always. The nice thing is he will knock fucking zombies over if you haven't killed them, but like for me, there weren't very many zombies left by the time he was stalking me around. What really sucks is if there are lickers on the prowl. So yeah, watch out for that, because you don't want to get caught between lickers and Mr. X. That's a whole box full of suck. Yeah, the dogs were great. They were, as advertised, they were just as fearsome as they were in the original game and in all other games. They did a really, really good job with the dogs. I also liked the plant zombie monster things, because in the old game they were like walking plants that spit acid on you. And yeah, by 1998 standards, they look like ass. But I like the whole plant monster thing because they were hard to kill. They had those little bulbous things you had to shoot, but that still wasn't the most reliable way to handle it. Burning them was, of course. They were threatening. They weren't easy to take down. The music in that whole area was awesome. Added to the tension. Capcom did a really, really great fucking job with this game. I mean, I know I'm tearing it apart here a little bit, but overall, like I was really, really proud of the job that they did because they made zombies scary again, which I wasn't even sure was fucking possible, but no, they pulled that off like a charm. And B, they did what they did with the original remake in that for the first game, in that you've played this game 1,000 times, but now you're playing it again, brand new, and it's somehow scarier than it was the first time. That's what they did with the original remake, and that's what they did with this one. So, overall, great fucking job. Now that we're closer to the release of Resident Evil 3, though, and there are more trailers for that game that have come out, it does appear to me, maybe I'm crazy here, maybe you guys disagree, maybe you don't, but some of the expansion of the story of Resident Evil 3 seems to be better handled than Resident Evil 2. I don't know, it on the one hand, the demo has certain little bugs, the frame rate drops whenever you aim at a zombie from far away. Sometimes their limbs disappear. That could all be ironed out by the time the game comes out, but on the other hand, it looks even better. Look, Jill looks so much more real. Everything looks, and the way it's almost like they were planning the Resident Evil 3 remake at the same time as the Resident Evil 2 remake, because I mean, look how soon after Resident Evil 2. Yeah, it was almost a full year later, but it was just 1 year later, and they were already so far along, and we had a full-on trailer, and yeah, thankfully the leaks that they were working on Resident Evil 3 turned out to be true, but I almost want to say they were working on it at the same time as this game, because what makes me think that the most is how they've been handling Robert Kendo, the gun store owner. In playing Resident Evil 2 remake, they clearly had something in mind for him, and then they added those things after Resident Evil 3 was announced, like Jill's note and all that stuff. And his brief appearance in Resident Evil 2 suggests to me that they were always planning to make Resident Evil 3 as well, and that they had something bigger, better in store for him than his fate from the original game, and they knew what it was, we didn't, and we're about to find out what it was. Everything seems so much more. Resident Evil 3 appears to be the true... It's finally getting the respect it deserves, I dare say, because you ask Capcom, even a year ago, and they would tell you that the true third game of the series is Code Veronica. A lot of fans feel that way, sure, but Resident Evil 3 was never intended in the beginning to be the third Resident Evil game. In fact, it was meant to be a spin-off. It was going to be like Resident Evil Last Escape or whatever. It was going to be a spin-off, and they were working with Sega Dreamcast, on Resident Evil Code Veronica, but Sony reminded them, hey, Capcom, you signed a deal for your first 3 games on the PlayStation. What are you doing? And Capcom was like, oh, yeah, you're right. Well, here's the third game. And, the rest is history. But Resident Evil 3 originally was not intended to be, Resident Evil 3. 3 is in the third game. And so its story was sort of... That's why there were so many little experimental elements, like the dodge and the ammo crafting, and which back then, like I remind you, that game was the first to implement those things, and they just didn't. And for years afterward, Resident Evil 3. I feel like those of you who also love Resident Evil 3 as much as me, I think you'll probably agree, it never did get the respect it deserved. Despite having Jill in it, and Jill was from the first game, Jill was sort of an important character, but yeah, Code Veronica did expand on the original story. It continued the story. It takes place completely after Resident Evil 2, whereas Resident Evil 3 takes place, 24 hours before it, and then it catches up to it. But, yeah, I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, am I crazy here? Does it seem like Resident Evil 3... was planned around the same time as Resident Evil 2, and they didn't tell anyone until it was time? If so, bravo, Capcom. That's fucking genius. You had us all distracted by the notion of remaking Resident Evil 2, while at the same time you were always planning to remake Resident Evil 3 as well. That's fucking bravo. But yeah, why don't you guys tell me what you think? Because engagement helps my videos get more exposure. But yeah, no, they actually really do. But yeah, we're all under lockdown. We're all under quarantine. Gotta kill some time. God, it's Resident Evil 3, so close but so far away. It fucking bugs the shit out of me. Like, comment, share, subscribe, recommend me to a friend. And I will see you guys very soon with a video about the Trials of Mana remake. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.